Thanks for staying with us. We begin from Washington, D.C. in the U.S., where the International Monetary Fund is urging Ghana to intensify efforts in domestic revenue mobilization, highlighting persistent challenges in raising taxes that match the country's economic activity and spending needs. Speaking at a news conference during the IMF World Bank Spring meetings, Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva stressed that bold and difficult measures are necessary to address the shortfall.
Different countries face different challenges. If I were to come with some basic recommendations that apply to Africa, I would say, and actually they apply to Nigeria, they apply to Egypt, they apply to Ghana, they apply to Cote d'Ivoire. First, continue on a path of strengthening your fundamentals. There is still a lot that can be done on the fiscal side to have strength, to have the buffers for a moment of shock. And don't use any excuses around, oh, it's difficult, we can't really go for more tax, because yes, you can. There is a lot that can be done to broaden the tax base and a lot that can be done to reduce tax evasion and tax avoidance. Using technology, as some countries are doing, to chase the tax dollar when there is the foundation for that is a very good thing to do.
Meanwhile, Imani Ghana Vice President Bryce Simmons has cautioned that Ghana is on track to exit the International Monetary Fund program without meeting some critical benchmarks. The country is slated to complete the program by May next year, with goals including a significant reduction in debt and improved revenue mobilization. However, speaking on PM Express Business Edition, Mr. Simmons argued the latest data suggests Ghana is unlikely to hit those targets, making a compelling case for the government to consider negotiating a follow-up program.
So that the timeline is 2028, right? Yeah. And we've ended the program 2026.
Yeah.
So the cop-out there is that the program is going to end and they say that we are on track. But everybody knows we won't. So at that point, then the decision has to be taken by the government whether to have another ECF to anchor the strategy, or if we find the ECF too restrictive, then to unshackle from the ECF, but to make the requirements irrelevant, because at that moment our debt carrying capacity is higher. You get my point?
Yeah.
The reason we want to bring it to 55% is because our current debt carrying capacity has been assessed to be lower than we think. So handling debt at 70% of GDP or 80% of GDP is considered too risky. But I'm thinking that they'll try and change the narrative by saying that, look, let's say by 2027, they've managed to go back to the capital markets, etc. So we now have market access and all of that. They'll say, look, given my market access, given all those facts, we think 75% left to GDP is not too risky. Another thing that might pop up is the rebasing, which might then change the dynamic around the base of the denominator. The problem there is that it then worsens another benchmark, which is the revenue to GDP. So revenue to GDP will not meet that benchmark. 18% is not.
But I'll be coming back to the program focus on the targets and all that. But I get from you that you're the school of thought, and I stand to be educated, is that let's end the program and let's look at any discussion for an extension, despite the fact that we could have used an extended program to seek fresh funding for the economy.
I'm agnostic. I think that it's a sideshow, because ultimately what's going to happen is that by 2026, the IMF will do a victory lap dance. The government will join them, and then we will conclude by 2028 that we will not have, we will not be able to meet those targets. But then by that time, we're not in the program. So the question then will become, okay, do we need a program to get to the targets because the targets are still relevant? I think at that time the targets will not be relevant. They will not be relevant anymore.
All right, we're turning to the mining sector. Statement coming in from the African Center for Energy Policy on the diamond mine issues, essentially commending the government of Ghana's decision to grant Abosu Goldfields Limited a 12-month extension of its lease at diamond mine, subject to parliamentary ratification in May 2025. That statement in your shorts right now. Under this arrangement, open pit mining will proceed. Existing stockpiles will continue to be processed under a joint government company management, and no final transfer of ownership will occur until the extended lease period elapses. This phased consultative approach aligns with ASEP's call for dialogue, adherence to due process, and caution against sacrificing investor confidence at the altar of expediency as set out in their previous press statement on April 17. ASEP, though, while appreciating the local content spirit and government's intention to eventually transition the mine into Ghanaian ownership after the extension period, says it is mindful that mining is a capital-intensive and high-risk venture that demands more than patriotic aspirations. It says if the government intends to assume direct operational control, as it has communicated, it must be transparent about how it plans to do so sustainably. The Minerals Income Investment Fund, the most convenient candidate for such an undertaking, has not demonstrated the operational readiness to manage a mine of this scale, it says, especially given its track record in handling mineral royalties for investment purposes. The government, it says, must also recognize the significant funding needs of the Damine project, which requires over $600 million in additional investment to sustain operations. It says any proposed takeover must convince the Ghanaian public of a credible financing strategy and operational plan. It says a more prudent option would be for the government to stagger its equity acquisition and strategically share the risk with an experienced investor. Mining is not without its challenges, it says. We have lived experience from the 1970s, and we must approach this transition with caution, lest the government risks institutionalizing the very resource hemorrhages it claims to cure. ASEP says, encouraging continued and broader consultations to explore alternative models that deliver sustainable long-term value for the people of Ghana. And so that's a statement from ASEP in reaction to the lease agreement reached between Goldfields and the government. Meantime, the administrator of the Minerals Development Fund, MDF, Dr. Hannah Louisa Bisu-Korte, has urged stakeholders in the mining sector to establish a dedicated task force to monitor corporate social responsibility efforts and implement the polluter pays principle. Speaking at a stakeholder forum, she emphasized that such a task force would help ensure greater transparency in profit declarations by mining companies and hold them accountable for environmental damage.
We also are into partnership with some other business entities. They want to invest, is where to trust. And they've shown trust in Mineral Development Fund. So this year they'll be training, about 1,500 young people, both men, male, female, and people living with disability in these mining communities, you know, in fabrication or manufacturing of drones for agricultural purposes. They'll be using it to spraying the lands and stuff. We are going to do the fish farm and aquaculture. You know, the life in water bodies gone now, so we've gotten off-takers, and so we're going to train 1,000 of these young ones this year. Each one will have a startup kit, and they will start, and we have technical people monitoring. We will be putting up the 100,000 aquaculture farm, fish farm, with the processing plant. So all these ones will come through that. We already have the off-taker who will be taken from these ones. Also, when we go into the Nkoko Nkete, we are going to involve also the mining communities to off-take these the Nkoko when they grow. I mean, when they are matured to hit the market. We'll be looking at the two fronts. We'll be looking at broilers and layers. Broilers 35 days, the child knows that once it is done well, when I say child, they should forgive me, but the young one, they know that once it's done and it's done properly, they will have about 45% to 50% profit, which is very good.
While in other news, the Center for Extractives and Development Africa, CEDA, has launched a 22-month research initiative aimed at exploring Ghana's transition pathways to electric 2- and 3-wheelers, commonly known as Okadas, and tricycles. Now, speaking at the launch, Executive Director Samuel Bekwe emphasized the need for effective regulation of the sector to attract the necessary investment. Here's more in this report.
Speaking at the launch, Executive Director of CEDA, Samuel Bekwe, highlighted the strategic role of Ghana's transportation sector in advancing the country's decarbonization goals and its economic potential.
The key issue is that for you to put or incentivize people to go into that particular sector, you're supposed to put down or put the basis in terms of infrastructure. What infrastructure are we developing for this? All these are some of the things that we want to look into. So our work will focus on regulatory analysis. We will look at economic viability for those who want to come and invest. We will also look at the climate impact assessment, including some life cycle assessment for owning an electric motorbike versus a petrol-based motorbike, and how long it pays back, and the efficiency of it. And then we also look at gender disaggregation in terms of north-south divide, the use, and why sometimes women will come to the south, they don't want to ride. We want to understand. And if electric bike becomes one of the areas we adopt, we anticipate that we will cut our emissions by a significant margin.
Technical Director to the Minister of State for Climate Change and Sustainability, Cedric Jello, reiterated the government's commitment to formalizing the adoption of electric vehicles.
Those of you who have followed the actions and position of government, you notice that this is one of the key agenda on the plate of government, and even in the promise of the NDC, the regularization of the Okada business is one of the core, agenda that is being pushed. And so I'm very excited that, ensuring that e-vehicles in terms of these two-wheelers and three-wheelers are being pushed, and I have no doubt that at the policy level, the Honourable Minister would push this to ensure that the subsidies, to ensure giving of grants, to ensure that all the things that are needed to support businesses, to support individuals, and to support even the riders, are being championed.
The project launched in Accra is being implemented by SEDA with technical and financial support from the Climate Compatible Growth Programme and the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office.
Now, Chief Executive Officer of the Venture Capital Trust Fund, Michael Abe, has reaffirmed the fund's dedication to improving operational efficiency as part of efforts to expand support for small and medium-sized enterprises nationwide. He made the remarks at the Ghana Venture Capital Conference, which also marked the launch of the fund's 20th Anniversary Impact Report.
We are also looking at establishing the 24-hour Economy SME Fund, and this is to support businesses that are already in existence but would want to scale up and, of course, increase productivity. And we already having some conversations with the 24-hour Economy Secretariat of the Presidency to see how we bring this to fruition. Of course, we are committed to our existing commitment we have with our fund managers, and so we hope that with these initiatives, particularly on the investment side, and the other initiatives we are doing in terms of the ecosystem development work, we should be able to, in a couple of years' time, help to build Ghana's venture capital and private equity system. Indeed, so 3-4 weeks ago, we had our VCAP, which is our Venture Capital Analyst Program exit ceremony, which graduated about 20 analysts. And it is with the vision of churning out human resource into the venture capital private equity ecosystem to sustain the work in the ecosystem.
Watching the marketplace on Joy News. We're taking a short break. Show business up next after that. And welcome back to the marketplace and to show business, the lighter side of things. Earlier this week, popular Nigerian actress and producer Bimbo Ademoye called out Ghanaian television stations for airing her movies without permission. Her statement highlights a growing issue in the African entertainment industry, unauthorized broadcast and intellectual property theft. Well, joining me is culture journalist Kenneth Awochidako, who is back from groomsmen duties. To discuss the implications of the issue and the way forward, we'll show you a picture of him and others
you don't have to.
at Kofi Eje's wedding. By the way, he's off the market. And so back to the issue. I mean, oh, there you go. that's him. Leading the whole.
And that's the new, newly wed
Kofi Eje.
gentleman, Kofi Eje, who's off the market now.
Well, yeah. He's off the market.
Looking fantastic.
Yeah, looking fun.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's Ken Awochidako. Anyway,
it's Kofi's day.
Our way of saying congratulations as a Kofi Eje and watch Beyond the Numbers later today, although he will not be on. But back to our subject for discussion. How big of a problem is this thing with unauthorized movie broadcasting in Ghana? Why is Bimbo's case significant?
So imagine having, for instance, this is how I think we can put this in context. So having like a big shop and having your ware being sold and advertised in front of your shop, and having another person come set up right in front of you and then be giving out your wares for free. Mm-hmm. That is exactly what the situation with this Nigerian producer is. So what the frustration is that having invested so much in creating and putting together the level of production that you need to be able to put out a film, only to have television stations show them on their stations for free. And it is something that is being very frustrating for people who are pushing so much investment into this art form. And so that is one thing that is frustrating them. And also the fact that it's coming from a producer and an actress as big as Bimbo, it makes it quite, it sort of doubles down on the issue, because it is now being seen as something that is at the forefront of things. Initially, there are producers who might not have that clout to come out and then speak, because most of them like to be behind the scenes and allow the actors do their thing. So even though they own these art pieces, they do not have that capacity to speak on the content, because most of the time it's usually said that you let the art speak for itself. And so if you are seen talking about the art in a different form, people feel like you are going outside what the core values of art actually is. And so that's why it's important that an actress like herself, who is also a film producer, stands in front of the issues and then speaks about them vehemently.
Yeah, the team, the control room, put a video of her ranting. You can see, I think there's a tweet alongside where she tagged the president as well.
Exactly.
What are the legal implications for TV stations that broadcast movies without permission?
What many people do not know is there's actually a Copyright Act in Ghana which provides a framework within which broadcasters are allowed to show some of these content. And so for a station like the ones that are in this country, for instance, and also the smaller ones, because most of them are the ones that are found, as culprits in these issues, because they feel like because they are smaller entities, the law cannot come after them. And so most of them seem to get away with some of these infringements. And so if they understand that there are laws that guide some of these things, and so most of what they need to do is that they have to make sure that every content that is being put out by their channel, they ensure that it is in line with the Copyright Act, and also ensure that they have the various agreements and the various permissions from each stakeholder in the value chain to be able to show these things, to ensure that they are not hit by legal suits, which are also a consideration that these producers can also resort to.
Yeah, but aren't these TV stations essentially promoting African cinema? That's what we've been pushing for, right? And,
It is indeed a form of projecting the art form and the culture as well. But the fact that it is being done illegally creates room for ethical issues. Mm-hmm. Because the fact that it is something that is something good that you're doing, trying to push the culture out there, does not mean that you should find alternative ways of doing that. The legal route to use is to seek permission from the authorities, if it's supposed to be from the Film Producers Association, whichever entity that's being the regulatory body, whichever organization is supposed to be, consulted before some of these things are done, to ensure that legal issues do not come up in the process.
Yeah, well, just referring to a tweet there, I'm just reading a bit of it. So since it's gotten to this stage, I believe, Mr. President, sir, with all due respect, sir, it's time to weigh in. This has become an international embarrassment, she says. 15 seconds, I'm told I have. What's the way forward, for channels that are complicit?
The way forward is, having conversations, coming to a consensus. Film producers, broadcasters, in the value chain, everyone who is concerned with the movie industry and the film. Is not even limited to movie, but music and other art forms as well, because you are seeing people exhibit art in some galleries that are not being allowed to. And so there needs to be conversation and education as to how it can be done in a proper way to ensure that both parties benefit from the airing of this content.
All right. Kenneth Auchidako, grateful for your time. We hear that you are going to be the next of the market. So, yes, that's the marketplace. Thanks for watching, everybody. I like the fact that they are putting the camera on you just to make a statement. myjoyonline.com /business. That's where to get the day's latest stories. Enjoy your weekend.